Hello, my name is Annika Goldman, and I am a third-year student in the clinical psychology department. My co-author on this paper and advisor is Dr. Joshua Magee, and the title of this project is Evaluation of a Pilot Psychoeducational Intervention for Subjective Cognitive Concerns in Older Adults. So I'll try to break this down for you to give you some back information. So essentially, intrusive thoughts are thoughts that pop into one's mind unexpectedly, are distressing, and difficult to control. Everyone experiences intrusive thoughts, no matter what your age is, and for most of us, it doesn't cause too much distress. However, for some individuals, intrusive thoughts can turn into some disorders. So, for instance, it's a transdiagnostic feature of generalized anxiety disorder, for instance, other anxiety disorders, and especially obsessive compulsive disorder. And what turns these intrusive thoughts into more of a disorder is how we envision, how we control them, and how we appraise these thoughts. So, why we think they're there and where they came from. When older adults experience intrusive thought related disorders, they can be especially at risk for things like physical and cognitive health decline, and treatments are less effective for this population, as well as research is more limited in this area for older adults compared to, for instance, younger adults or middle-aged people. There are some key differences in how older adults experience thoughts compared to other age groups. So, for instance, older adults perceive less control over intrusive thoughts. They tend to have different content, so something shifting from more morally based thoughts to ones that are more related to physical health and cognitive health. It is interesting to note, though, that the occurrences of intrusive thoughts are very common across the lifespan and don't differ in frequency or duration. So, as an example of maybe a different appraisal, it might be something like, I just can't get this thought out of my mind. It must be because I'm getting dementia. Or I have this thought that's so disturbing to me, I must be losing my mind, something like that. So, in comes the role of subjective cognitive concerns. And what those are tend to be common in older adults that see their cognitive functioning as much worse than it actually is because of some of the messages we get in the media and some of the added concern that this population has about cognitive decline. So these are people who think that they have cognitive concerns in the absence of actual cognitive concerns. So SCCs can contribute to a greater risk for monitoring our thought processes and interpreting intrusive thoughts in maladaptive ways. And so that's why this is a key factor that we're focusing on for my research. First hypothesis is, can a novel psychoeducational article disrupt this reinforcing process of maladaptive attributions by lowering subjective cognitive concerns? So this was a pilot study run for my master's thesis. The idea being that if we can lower some of these concerns, we can maybe lower some of these negative appraisals, and in that way also eventually see better outcomes and lower rates of intrusive thought disturbances in older adults. Additionally, we were probing to see what additional factors may impact the success of this intervention. So how we did that was we recruited individuals on an online platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk. We recruited 245 older adults over the age of 60 who have not been diagnosed with any neurocognitive diseases. The majority of these individuals were female and the majority were white. They were randomly assigned into 3 conditions. So some read this short article about cognitive aging, or sometimes we call memory control, or the memory group. And then there was the control article, which was matched with the cognitive aging article, but for cardiovascular aging. And then we had a no article group. Next, individuals rated these articles based on how relevant they were and some other key factors, and answered questions assessing their subjective cognitive concerns. So what we found was that there are no significant differences in any measures of SCCs across the 3 groups. So as you can imagine, that was a big bummer. But we did do some exploratory post hoc testing and found that in the cognitive aging condition, individuals were much less concerned about losing control of their thoughts compared to the no article control condition. Next, we did a series of generalized linear models exploring how cognitive versus cardiovascular aging articles interacted with relevance rating and age to predict SCC. And we found that for measures asking about concern, there was a three-way interaction. And I have some graphs to show that a little bit later. In addition, relevance by interaction was significant for the cognitive aging, but not the cardiovascular aging article condition. So in other words, at high levels of relevance and as age increased, SCCs decreased for the cognitive aging group. So as you can see here, this is the cognitive aging, or we also call memory condition. So for people who rated fear of developing Alzheimer's highly, then it looks like it was higher at low age, and it decreased as age went up, which was interesting. And this was only seen for people who viewed their cognitive aging as highly relevant to them. And let's see, on the flip side, we see the question about concern over control of thoughts, and we had a similar pattern. Notice also that people who didn't find this article relevant didn't have much of an interaction here. So we did get the intended effect that as people got older, they did experience some decrease in a objective cognitive concern measure, showing that perhaps this article was effective for them, but mostly for older people. The heart or cardiovascular control condition showed a very different kind of set of interactions. And for the sake of time, I won't get too much into that. But we saw that even on a high relevance rating, there wasn't much of a change over an age in SCC. So to sum it up, this type of psychoeducational article is the most promising for the oldest of older adults who view subjective cognitive concerns as relevant to them. It lends support for a short and accessible intervention for lowering SCCs, and it could be useful in future experimental studies, aiming to investigate the role of SCCs in anxiety and obsessive-compulsive related disorders among older adults. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to take